The defense companies were a paramilitary force in Syria that were commanded by Rifat al-Assad. Their task was to defend the Assad government, and Damascus, from internal and external attack. In 1984 they were merged into the Syrian Arab Army as the 4th Armored Division and the Republican Guard, as well as the 14th Airborne Division, comprising 5 Special Forces regiments. History and deployment. The lessons of the Six-Day War of 1967 pointed to the fact of the weak airborne and heavy armor capabilities of the Syrian military. There was a perceptible lack of expertise in combined arms operations involving a combined deployment of armored, artillery and airborne infantry units. Top Syrian military commanders and Hafez al-Assad recognized the need to create a powerful and operationally self-sufficient divisional command that would incorporate all the elements of modern combined arms. Also, the political instability of the preceding decade in Syria pointed to the necessity of having a large and well-equipped body of highly loyal soldiers with strategic responsibilities of dealing with threats to the Ba'athist government. From 1968 onwards, many Alawite officers and soldiers from the regular army were sent for advanced training to the Soviet Union in order to build up such a unit. The defense companies were founded in 1971 under this plan and were organizationally and operationally independent of the regular armed forces. They were under the command of Rifat al-Assad, the president's brother. The defense companies were garrisoned outside Damascus, with the primary mission of countering attempted coups and challenges to the Assad government. These special forces, however, also had military missions beyond the role of a Praetorian Guard. The defense companies were initially trained by Soviet Spetsnaz Special Forces, VDV Airborne Forces, and the Soviet Army Tank Corps. They had regular Soviet advisors and conducted frequent war games and field exercises with the Soviet Army. Their expertise lay in Soviet-style combined arms operations involving armor, mechanized, artillery, and airborne forces. Defense companies' commanders were known to be personally close to several high-ranking Soviet military officials, like Vasily Margelov and Dmitry Sokorukov, commanders of the VDF Airborne Forces. The defense companies served in Syria's first armed intervention in the Lebanese Civil War in 1976, especially the initial offensive operations against PLO and PSP positions in Sidon and the Chouf, and were involved in internal security operations during the nationwide strikes and demonstrations in Aleppo in March 1980 and in June 1980. Lt. Col. Nassif ran a revenge operation after an attempted assassination of the president in 1980, in which a battalion of defense company soldiers killed up to 1,000 Tadmor prison inmates suspected of belonging to the Muslim Brotherhood. In spring 1982, 2 brigades of the defense companies and other elite armored formations were deployed in Hama to quell an Islamist uprising, in what became known as the Hama Massacre. Members of the defense companies are alleged to have been involved in a February 1981 assassination attempt against the Prime Minister of Jordan, Muda Badran. In Lebanon, defense companies units supported pro-Syrian Lebanese militias, and cooperated closely with the Tripoli-based Arab Knights of the Arab Democratic Party, and the Lebanese Ba'ath Party and its militia, the Assad Battalion. Structure and equipment. Members of the approximately 55,000-strong defense companies were organized into companies of 120 to 200 men, which in turn were organized into battalions of about 600 to 800 men, under Lt. Col. Battalion commanders were directly under the command of the division commander, Rifat al-Assad, who actually held the rank of brigadier throughout this period. There were separate aviation squadrons and artillery battalions within the defense companies. Most defense company soldiers, including tank crewmen and artillery personnel, received advanced commando and parachute training, as well as basic training in tank warfare. The unit included a female parachutist corps. The defense companies were equipped with some of the most modern weapons available to the Syrian army, including T-72 tanks, BM-21 Grad rocket artillery units, 2 S-4 open heavy mortar vehicles, 122 mm howitzer, 2 A-18 field artillery howitzers, and Mi-24D and Mi-8 attack helicopters, and could demand logistical help and support from the regular military. The defense company paratroop units were usually deployed from the An-22 or Il-76 aircraft. At their peak in 1983–84, the force had about 1,200 T-72 tanks, 120 Mi-8 and 75 Mi-24D attack helicopters, and 3 battalions of BM-21 Grad systems. During this period, the whole Syrian military only had 7 Grad battalions, and 3 of them were with the defense companies, illustrating the unit's importance in the Syrian military hierarchy. They were also equipped with 4 units of the very powerful 2S-4 Type and 240 mm self-propelled heavy mortar vehicles. The 3rd and 10th Armored Divisions were the only other Syrian division having access to this weapons system. The defense companies have also been deployed against Jordan. In late February 1981, some of their senior commanders, including Colonel Adnan Barakat, were alleged to have been involved in an abortive assassination attempt against Jordanian Prime Minister Mudir Badran. Members of the defense companies also reportedly have been sent abroad to monitor Syrian political exiles and to impede their activities. In Lebanon, defense companies' units have supported pro-Syrian Lebanese militias, such as the Tripoli-based Arab Knights of the Arab Democratic Party, and the Lebanese Ba'ath Party and its militia, the Assad Battalion. Following a power struggle between Rifat al-Assad and his rivals in the armed forces in early 1984, the defense companies were renamed Unit 569 and reorganized as a standard armored division with 4 armored and 3 mechanized brigades. Training, doctrine and uniform training consisted primarily of infantry training combined with special forces commando training modeled on the Soviet system. Recruits who passed this initial stage were given parachute training as well as advanced training either in airborne operations, artillery, armor or mechanized forces. Training for recruits usually was for 1 year, whereas for officers it was for 2 years, including a 4-month course at Soviet military academies. However, almost all defense companies' personnel were qualified paratroopers as well as had to pass a basic course on familiarization with tanks and tank warfare. Tank training and doctrine was focused on using tanks and armored formations in urban warfare environments, close quarters combat, in deployment of tank units alongside airborne special forces used as shock troops. According to several defense company commanders, they developed their own military theories and doctrines, especially a new armored doctrine in which the tank itself was to substitute as a commando soldier in close-quarters urban combat. The tank was to be considered as an individual commando in an urban combat situation, and thus tank training was very intensive and focused on attaining unimaginable feats with the tank. This included engaging targets at less than 20 meters range, firing the main gun from within a building, and so on. These tactics were developed by Syria officers during the Muslim Brotherhood insurgency in Hama and Aleppo, and in Lebanon. This strategy was used extensively by successor units of the Syria in the Syrian civil war. The Syria al-Difa wore combat uniforms quite distinct from the regular Syrian military. Their uniform consisted of lizard-patterned camouflage fatigues along with Soviet combat boots, helmets and bulletproof vests. Headgear consisted of a red or orange beret. After basic training, the Syria conducted their advanced courses at secret locations in the Damascus countryside, Tartus Mountains, and in Syrian-controlled parts of Lebanon. Much of the initial generations of Syria soldiers had been trained in the Soviet Union. Women's special military forces from the defense companies ate live snakes as part of their training, while children being training in paramilitary activities were trained to stab live puppies to death. Syrian special forces also ate live scorpions and snakes, and live puppies during training.